Hello and welcome to the briefing. Gloria de Piero. Lots coming up today, including a look ahead to tomorrow's budget. We'll be talking dangerous driving and how it devastates lives, plus the latest in my series of interviews with MPs. This time it's Yorkshire MP Robbie Moore, who this evening will be having a debate in Parliament to tackle child sexual abuse in his region. But first, it's the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 12 o'clock. Teachers, nurses and police are among the public sector workers in line for a pay rise next year. The Chancellor will announce the change for millions of workers in tomorrow's budget. It comes after Rishi Sunak paused public sector pay increases, with the exception of the NHS and those earning less than £24,000 a year after heavy borrowing during the pandemic. Emily Carver from the Institute of Economic Affairs says this won't compensate for the rising cost of living.
It's not going to compensate for the loss of the £20 uplift in universal credit, which of course affects far more people. But then, of course, we've got the cost of living squeeze, which the government is going to have to grapple with. We've seen already so much from the budget that's been briefed in advance, and it seems that they're very much tinkering around the edges when it comes to the cost of living. We've seen a VAT cut on energy bills, potentially a freeze or a cut on, alcohol duties. That's not really going to be enough to make this winter easier for people who are pinching the pennies.
The Parliamentary Committee on Standards has recommended that Conservative MP Owen Paterson should be suspended for 30 days for breaching lobbying rules. An investigation into Paterson's lobbying for two companies he was a consultant for revealed an egregious case of paid advocacy. The former Cabinet Minister, though, rejected the findings, accusing the Parliamentary Commissioner of making up her mind before she'd even spoken to him. The Independent Office for Police Conduct say the number of police officers they've probed for allegations of sexual misconduct has spiked over the last 3 years. Last year, they investigated 70 police staff accused of abusing their position for sexual purposes. In 2016, they investigated 10. Between April of 2018 and March this year, the IOPC proved the misconduct of 63 individuals, 38 of whom were either sacked or resigned. The mother of two murdered sisters, Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, has dismissed an apology from the Met Police. The force had apologised to the family for their initial response to reports that the two sisters were missing. They were found dead in a North London park in June last year. Daniel Hussein will be sentenced for the double murder this week. Met Commissioner Cressida Dick said the force's handling of the case was below the standard it should have achieved. A US judge has set a deadline for Prince Andrew to answer questions under oath in the civil sexual assault case against him. Both the Duke of York and his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, must complete written statements on or before the 14th of July. Virginia Giuffre is seeking unspecified damages from the 61-year-old. Prince Andrew has repeatedly denied the allegations made against him, and his lawyer has dismissed the accusations as baseless. Animal rights activists have scaled a government building in Westminster, urging world leaders to invest in a plant-based future. 4 protesters from Animal Rebellion, they're an offshoot from Extinction Rebellion, climbed the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. They began protesting at 6 a.m. and they say they plan to stay there indefinitely. James, on the side of the building, told GBNews the UK's government's priorities are wrong.
The UK government is being a public nuisance by spending £1.5 billion of taxpayer money on subsidies for the meat and dairy industry. That's an industry that is ultimately killing the planet and killing billions of animals. In the meantime, it's spending £150 million, that's 10% of that, on planting trees and similarly on alternative proteins. It goes to show the government's priorities in terms of propping up unsustainable and unprofitable industries over what's ultimately better for the public and for the planet.
The former manager of Rangers, Walter Smith, has died aged 73. Smith led Rangers to 10 wins in top titles, as well as the UEFA Cup final in 2008. In his career, he also managed the Scottish national side and Everton. The club chairman, Douglas Park, said Walter will be sorely missed by all of us at Rangers. Our Scotland reporter, Davie Donaldson, has this update.
Walter Smith's death will come as a huge shock to many, especially those of Rangers Football Club, the supporters and all the staff there as well. He was certainly highly regarded there, and little wonder. 21 trophies during 2 spells with the club. An absolute phenomenal achievement, you have to say, and of course the last 7 titles of that 9 in a row success for Rangers. This is a pivotal day, a sad day in Scottish football, highly regarded by not just people at Rangers Football Club, but across Scotland as well.
You're up to date here on GB News. I'll have more in half an hour, but right now, back to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on the briefing, as Rishi Sunak prepares to deliver his autumn statement tomorrow, we're building up to the budget with former Special Advisor to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Catherine MacLeod. Also, I'll be continuing my series of MP surgeries. Today, I'm joined by Labour MP Stephanie Peacock and her constituent to discuss the devastating effects of drink and drug driving and why they're working together to increase the sentencing for death by dangerous driving. And for today's Real Me, I'm speaking to Conservative MP Robbie Moore ahead of his debate tonight, where he'll be showing the reasons he's calling for a Rotherham-style independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Bradford. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. Chancellor Rishi Sunak's budget is tomorrow, but we already know a lot of what will be announced. Yesterday we learned that the minimum wage is going up to £9.50 an hour. Today we're told that public sector workers will be getting more money too. But given the removal of the universal credit uplift, a cost of living crisis and rising prices, will people actually be better off? Well, joining me to make sense of it all is Catherine MacLeod, former Special Advisor to Alistair Darling, the last Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer. Catherine, it's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
So you know what it's like to be at the side of the Chancellor the day before he delivers the budget. You were at Alistair Darling's side. Just tell me about the stress levels involved 24 hours ahead of the budget delivery.
I think there's a great deal of stress, although today there'll be a kind of sense of calm in the Treasury. Most of the work will be done. There'll be some Secretaries of State still trying to cajole the Chancellor and squeeze as much money out of the Treasury as possible. But by and large, the work will be done. And today he'll be concentrating on his speech for tomorrow, which is always important, and probably getting in touch with stakeholders, CBI, unions, newspaper editors, just to set them up for tomorrow. He probably won't tell them very much, although I don't know if there's very much left to tell after all the briefing that's gone on the last few days. But if he doesn't tell them any more today, he'll probably set them up to tell them more tomorrow.
And the Chancellor has faced criticism for briefing parts of the budget ahead of the official statement to Parliament. Now, I have a bit of sympathy here because I'm guessing that most of Britain is not going to be sat watching the House of Commons tomorrow at 12:30, but they will be watching the media and they will be reading the newspapers. So is it fair criticism? It happened under the Labour government. It always happens, doesn't it?
I think it does. It did happen. It happened a bit. It seems to be an extraordinary, detailed briefing that's gone on in the days leading up to the budget. I think you're right that people will not be sitting tomorrow at 12:30 watching the budget. And why should they, if most of them think that they've been briefed already? I mean, it's not so long ago, perhaps you're too young, but when the budget was a big day and people did stay in and watch what was happening in the budget, and you would see petrol queues, you would see people queuing for cigarettes or drink or whatever they wanted. But I think because there's been so much briefing, the excitement or the newsworthiness of the budget has been diminished. I do think what is really interesting is that, probably like most governments, that he so far has briefed good news. It makes you very suspicious as to what he's trying to get out there. Is there going to be a lot of bad news tomorrow, that he's trying to get the good news out first so that hopefully people will have formed their opinion, and the bad news might not get the traction that it probably deserves.
Let's talk about the spin and the gloss that all chancellors like to put on their numbers. There's been lots of money announced. It's been revealed that not all of the money that's been announced is new money. Exactly the same happened under Gordon Brown. He faced the same criticism. Does that sort of gloss and spin, does it diminish our trust in politics and politicians? Isn't it best to just be straight? This is new money, this is not new money, etc.
I think that's true. I think that it will, if people think that they're being sort of conned, that they will, it spoils trust. I think actually one of the things that Alistair Darling did try to do was to demonstrate what was new money and what was money that had been previously been announced, because we were very aware that you would lose any impact if people could turn around, or people in the media could turn around and said, well, we know this already. So I do think there is spin. I do think that the Treasury has always tried, even with Alistair Darling, to get out, to put the most positive spin in it. But, it might have been a plus or a minus, but Alistair was also pretty good because he had 3 years of experience of imparting bad news, that he was no stranger to it. I don't know if you remember, and it's a long time ago now, but there certainly was tension between the Treasury and Number 10 in Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown's time, because I think Alistair was sort of a realist, and he thought that people needed to know what was actually happening, and there was absolutely no point in just putting a positive spin on what he had to say.
There is a difficulty for Labour tomorrow, I think. I think the gravitational pull always in the Labour Party is to respond and say, we need to spend more money. I think that's also a danger for Labour. But what do you think?
Well, I think if that's what they said, that would indeed be a danger. But I don't think that's a fair representation of the position that we were in at the moment. If in 2010 Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling had spent the money that has been spent at the moment, there would have been an absolute outcry. It's hard to see how they can spend more money. It is how they should be spending the money that I hope the Labour government should be focusing on. Who is benefiting most? Is for all the talk of levelling up, what are they going to, how are they going to do it? How are people that are poorer going to be better off? Because even with the minimum wage, people tomorrow aren't going to be better off after they've taken away universal credit. It'll be very interesting to see what they're going to do for savers. And the big figure that we need to focus on tomorrow is what is the rate of inflation, because by the time the Chancellor sits down tomorrow, we could all find that we're all poorer because inflation is going to hit us all. So that's a problem. I think that Rachel Reeves and Bridget Phillipson, who I've seen out, are too smart probably just to go out and say spend more money. Hopefully they'll be focusing on how that money is spent. And people in the country aren't daft. They know that wherever the money is going to be spent, somebody is going to have to pay for it. We haven't found out who, apart from the cutting universal credit, we haven't found out yet who these people are going to be.
And the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, will respond to the budget statement. Just tell us, how long does the leader of the opposition, whether it's Conservative or Labour, how long do they have to digest it and formulate that response?
I actually don't know exactly. I would think it would be about an hour. It's a very hard response to make, but I think he will have most of his response written already. It's, he's probably got more information than most leaders have in the past. And I think that as well as the content, Rachel Reeves set out quite an interesting economic policies for the Labour government at the Labour Party conference. He won't deviate much from that. I think what he will have to do tomorrow, which will be very important, is adopt a tone that people find credible and empathise with. I think so. I think the tone will be as important as the content.
Catherine MacLeod, former advisor to the last Labour Chancellor, Alistair Darling, and former political editor, former journalist. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your insights, Catherine. Now, it's every parent's worst nightmare. to lose a child, but one mother whose son was stabbed and killed on a night out has waged a campaign to save the lives of others. Our Home Affairs editor, Mark White, has the story.
When you went out for a night, there was some kind of altercation in the pub. It was nothing to do with him at all, and he was stabbed, and I didn't see him again.
In the 4 years since her son was stabbed and killed, LYNNE BAIRD has fought a relentless campaign to do something positive in Daniel's memory. She is a remarkable woman who came up with the simple but highly effective idea for these specialist bleed control kits to help stem catastrophic blood loss long enough for expert help to arrive.
It's really got everything you would need. This tourniquet, obviously, I mean, for shutting off the extremities if you've got a big, serious arterial bleed.
Yep, military grade. Trauma bandage, that's for severe bleeding, you know, and practically foolproof to use as well.
Lynn believes that a simple bleed kit could have saved her own son.
There was no time. If there had been one of these kits in the pub and it had been used, we might have a different story now.
You're convinced of that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what made me carry on with this campaign.
With no end in sight to the epidemic of violent crime in many of our towns and cities, bleed control kits are now being rolled out more widely. More than 2,000 so far, with demand growing by the day. The Midlands Air Ambulance attend an average of 4 serious stabbings and shootings a week, and many more incidents where catastrophic blood loss is a key concern. Without a doubt, the Midlands Air Ambulance offers the very best critical care outside of the hospital environment, and they can get a patient to hospital in a fraction of a time it takes a land ambulance to do that. But there's no point in them even attending if a patient bleeds out before they arrive. More than 60% of call-outs for the air ambulance are trauma-related, where severe blood loss is common.
If someone has a cardiac arrest in the street, a defibrillator gets there and can make the difference in 30 seconds. Yet if somebody has a catastrophic bleed, where do you get the equipment that's going to save that life? So things like the bleed control kits, like the citizen aid advice that's available, and like the first aid training that's out there, those things together will save lives, and the interventions available in this kit will absolutely stop a catastrophic hemorrhage in the right place in the right time.
The murder of Sir David Amos has highlighted the continuing threat from terrorism, with authorities warning of the possibility of a fresh wave of attacks. Senior trauma specialists say bleed control kits, coupled with increased first aid training programmes, can help arm the public to better respond and help those caught up in an attack, where it can often be some time before medical help can reach them.
These kits are very, very useful, and it's worth saying that in particular high-risk areas like London, for example, Safeguard has worked very closely with the Metropolitan Police, with the local authorities, and there are at strategic locations multiple bleed kits stored around for exactly this reason, in that when you have not just one person but several people all with major hemorrhage, exactly the same principle applies, and that major hemorrhage needs to be controlled. It needs to be controlled very quickly.
The Bull's Head in Birmingham is one of the city's oldest and best known pubs. It led the way in placing bleed kits behind the bar, and now the whole of the Davenport's brewery chain has followed suit.
So all staff are trained, bar staff, floor staff, management, all of them are trained on how to use it. Just in case it was an instant thing that happened, anyone can apply it. Saves obviously wasting time, which is what that kit's for really, isn't it?
In recent weeks, the bleed control kits have been instrumental in saving the lives of 2 people who were stabbed in Birmingham and London.
I think it's absolutely wonderful that lives have been saved, which I said would happen at the beginning, and I'd just like to see these kits go all across the UK.
Nothing can ever really diminish the loss Lynn feels every day, but there is at least some comfort in the knowledge that lives are being saved in Daniel's memory. Mark White, GBNews, Birmingham.
Up next, it's the Next in My MP's Surgeries series. I'm joined by Labour MP Steph Peacock and one of her constituents to discuss the devastating effects of drink and drug driving and why they're working together to increase the maximum sentence for death by dangerous driving. Before that, it's the weather.
Hello there. Autumn is very much with us across the UK. Often quite cloudy out there through the day today. Some wet weather to come across Scotland, but very mild for this time of year. Now that's all down to our air coming up from the southwest. You can see these warm yellows and oranges produced across the map means that it is going to be a pretty mild picture. We have got weather fronts up towards Scotland bringing some rain and some fairly tightly packed isobars which bring a strong wind as well. Let's take a look at the picture across Scotland. We've already had some quite heavy rain pushing its way through during this morning. A brief lull in that rain, but then it turns heavier and more persistent for the Western Isles and Western Highland later on in the day. Strong and gusty winds, gusts of 50 miles an hour here. Elsewhere, quite a lot of cloud across the country. A few bright or sunny breaks, but very mild for this time of year. Highs of 17 degrees Celsius. Through this evening then, that rain starts to edge its way a little bit further east and southwards, getting into Northern Ireland through the evening, and then later in the night getting through into Northern England as well. To the south of it, it stays very mild. We'll have a few bits and pieces of drizzle across Western Hills. These are the temperatures we should be seeing by daytime in October, not the overnight temperatures with a keen breeze. As we go through Wednesday morning then, we've got this rain pushing its way in and persisting through much of the day. You can see it really doesn't move very quickly. So we have a rain warning in force. There is the risk of some flooding through Cumbria, southwest Scotland, some difficult travelling conditions as well. 1 or 2 showers to the west of Scotland. To the south of that rain band, another very mild day, highs of 18 degrees Celsius. That's 64 in Fahrenheit with a keen southwesterly breeze. As we go through Wednesday evening, then we'll continue to see this rain just trickling a little bit further southwards into northwest Wales. It stays on the mild side, a few clear spells as we go into the overnight period. And then it turns more unsettled more widely across the country through Thursday and Friday. Strong winds, the risk of some heavy rain. And as we head into the weekend, temperatures sliding away. I'll see you later.
Welcome back. Now, when we see MPs in Parliament, they're often shouting at each other across the Commons chamber. But that's not what being an MP is about. Helping constituents who get in touch with them forms a huge part of their work. That's what their constituency surgeries are all about. So each week, or as regularly as we're able, we want to bring you an MP and an ordinary person who have come together to campaign for change. Today, it's Stephanie Peacock, Labour MP for Barnsley East, and her constituent, Johnny Wood. Welcome to both of you. I'm going to start with you, Stephanie. Tell me what issue Johnny, brought to your constituency surgery?
So it's the incredibly tragic case of his sister, who used to go on a daily walk through the village of Brearley, which is just outside Barnsley. Each day she used to do this walk, and sadly, one day she was hit and killed by a stolen HGV lorry. There were 4 men joyriding this lorry around Barnsley, and they had 100 convictions between them.
Goodness. Over to you, Johnny. Tell us about your sister Jackie and how you found out the news, the tragic news about Jackie.
As Stephanie just said, is that Jackie used to go on a daily walk 5 times a week. Then she'd be out on a weekend socialising. The way that I found out was I was on my way to Scarborough to do a charity gig because I do a little bit of DJing. And I got a phone call to go down to our Jackie's from a friend of ours telling me that there'd been a serious accident and our Jackie had been involved. I got down to our Jacqueline's house. Our Kate was there, which is our Jackie's daughter, and 2 police officers. The police officers asked me who I was. I explained to them that I was Jackie's brother and that I had a phone call, and as I understand it, that she'd been in a serious accident. He then told me that we don't know if it is your sister at the present moment. And then my words to him was, is it a fatality? And he says, yes. So Kate was crying, and then her brother, Ryan, came into the house. He'd just come home from work, and they explained to him that there'd been a serious accident. Then the police officer stipulated that they got some articles to see if it was Jackie. And Ryan had to witness his mum's body by a tattoo on her back, a picture, a chain and a shoe. Ryan then said to the police officers, yes, these are my mum's. Then we had the discussion on what steps to be doing next. And to see what I saw that day, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was unbelievable.
It's terrible to listen.
All lives could steal a lorry right about over a 2-day period. If that lorry had been stolen in the London area, it would have been picked up straight away. But in the north of England, because of the facilities that's been cut back in our area on policing, and various other things, is that it wasn't picked up.
Johnny, when did you decide to... Sorry, carry on, I interrupted you. My apologies.
And then when I looked into it, what had actually happened is that the stolen lorry had entered Common Road at Brierley. A police officer had seen it. He wasn't chasing it, he was just following it, because it had been reported as a stolen vehicle. There were 4 characters inside it, or should I say 4 lowlifes. They'd gone around this corner. Seconds before they'd hit the corner, a young lady that was 6 months pregnant was in a car. She was moving home, and a friend of hers was at the back of her. She'd just got round the corner. The lorry was travelling at 56 miles an hour. It was an 8.25 ton lorry. As it went round the corner, she heard a smash, and it was her friend at the back of falling in a car that was hit by the lorry. Then the lorry hit another car. That car belonged to a gentleman whose daughter, he just left the car and was walking into his house. He'd actually said hello to our Jackie, and he just got in the house, and the car hit his car. His daughter was being married the day after. Then the car hit our Jackie, took her down the road, killed her instantly, then hit another car, and then went across the road and went into an house and demolished the house. The 4 lowlifes in the lorry, 2 of them jumped out to the right-hand side and went running, and there was the local community who actually apprehended them. The one that had stole the lorry had actually jumped out of the other side over his friend's body who was actually trapped in the vehicle, and he run across the road. He actually run by our Jacqueline's body and then went into hiding in the village of Barnsley. The police officer then came to the scene and apprehended two of the suspects. One was trapped in the lorry, obviously, and the one that stole the lorry had got away, the one that run by our Jackie's body. And then after that, the air ambulance turned up and managed to get the one that were trapped in the lorry out of the vehicle. And the air ambulance actually did make a programme about that, an hour-long special, which I was on.
Right. Thank you, Johnny. Stephanie, what did Johnny want you to do as his Member of Parliament, and what have you been able to do?
So he's obviously described the incredibly tragic situation, and I think following all of the issues that he's described, when it came to court, I believe this was one of the first times that 4 people were convicted of dangerous driving, because there was obviously one person driving, but 4 people in the cab, and as Johnny's described, they had 100 convictions between them, and in that judgment the judge wanted to give a stronger sentence, but by law at that point he could only give 14 years. Johnny was understandably completely outraged and angry about this, so he came to see me, and what he wanted to do was put pressure on the government to increase the sentence for death by dangerous driving.
And have they?
They have put it on the statute book now. It is going through Parliament. It took some time because they had promised it previously, but they hadn't acted upon it, and earlier this year they have done it. It's also worth saying that one of the men was actually in the probation system, so another issue that Johnny wanted to talk to me about was the complete mess that our probation system is in.
Johnny, you have been one of the reasons, you and going to see Stephanie, you've been one of the campaigners that has managed to get the government to change the law and increase that sentence. It came too late for Jackie and your family. Do you take some comfort for what you've been able to achieve by campaigning for change?
A little, yes, because the law change was actually put on this government's table in 2017 and Jackie was killed in 2018. If they would have implemented that law, then these 4 low lives would be saving life. They'll be coming out in the first one that actually was driving the vehicle, they'll be coming out in 2025. But back to the court system. When I was in court and I witnessed a top judge in this country, a QC, stipulating that it would like to have given him a lot more, but couldn't because of the way the system of the law stands. And that I know that he'd done a trial before and he'd stipulated in there. And it got my back up and I wanted to do something and try and get this law implemented. They've got the right to appeal. We, as the victims, have not got the right to appeal. So I wanted it, whereas the judge who were competent, and by the way, we were very happy on the way he conducted himself, and I witnessed him on a few occasions looking up to us in the public gallery and more or less thinking to us, I just want the jury to say that these low lives are guilty. 100 convictions they had between them. One had killed death by dangerous driving in the Barnsley area before, and one was on probation. You know, what's wrong? We've got to do something. We had to do something. And when I witnessed what I witnessed in court, the lorry actually hitting our Jackie on CCTV and taking her down the road and looking down at them 4 lives, and no remorse whatsoever from any of them, none at all, then something had to be done.
I'm so pleased, Johnny Wood and Stephanie Peacock, that you've been able to talk about how you work together. We obviously, everybody who's listening to you wish that it would never have had to happen, but thank you both for showing us why constituency surgeries are important. Love to you, Johnny, and your family from all of us at GB News, and thank you to Stephanie Peacock, Member of Parliament for Barnsley East. Still to come. On today is The Real Me. I'm speaking to Robbie Moore, the Conservative MP for Keighley in West Yorkshire. He'll be telling me why he's calling for a Rotherham-style independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Bradford. First, over to Rosie Wright for the latest news bulletin.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. Here are the latest headlines. Teachers, nurses and police are among the public sector workers in line for a pay rise next year. The Chancellor announced the change for millions of workers in tomorrow's budget. It comes after Rishi Sunak paused public sector pay increases, with the exception of the NHS and those earning less than £24,000 a year after heavy borrowing during the pandemic. The Independent Office for Police Conduct says the number of police officers they've probed for allegations of sexual misconduct has spiked over the last 3 years. Last year, they investigated 70 police staff accused of abusing their position for sexual purposes. In 2016, they investigated 10. Between April 2018 and March of this year, the IOPC proved the misconduct of 63 individuals, 38 of whom were either sacked or had resigned. The Parliamentary Committee on Standards has recommended that Conservative MP Owen Paterson should be suspended for 30 days. An investigation into Paterson's lobbying for 2 companies he was a consultant for revealed an egregious case of paid advocacy. The former Cabinet Minister rejected the findings, accusing the Parliamentary Commissioner of making up her mind before she'd even spoken to him. The Queen has carried out her first official engagement a week after her overnight stay in hospital. She appeared on a screen via video link from Windsor Castle, where she is in residence, during a virtual audience with the ambassador from the Republic of Korea. You're up to date here on GB News. I'll be back at 1 o'clock with an update, but right now, Gloria will be back after the break.
Now, some of you will have seen some of my Real Me interviews with politicians where we seek to get to know the person behind the politician. We do that again today with Robbie Moore, the Conservative MP for Keighley. But we've got some politics in this one too. That's because this evening in the House of Commons, Robbie has a debate where he's calling for a Rotherham-style independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Bradford.
Robbie Moore, you're 36. You grew up in Lincolnshire to farming parents. Did you have a happy childhood?
I did have a happy childhood, yes. It was challenging, of course. Parents got divorced when I was at primary school, which was always tough for any family. And that resulted in Mum moving from Lincolnshire up to Scotland with my sisters.
And you?
No, I stayed in Lincolnshire with my dad.
Oh.
And Dad brought me up with my aunt and my gran, because Dad wasn't great in the kitchen and all that sort of stuff. So my aunt and my gran brought us up from that respect in terms of cooking and the like. But yeah, no, it was but a happy childhood. Yeah, most definitely.
How often did you see your mum?
Probably, the main holidays, Christmas, summer and Easter were the main opportunities for seeing mum. And at the same time seeing my sisters, my two sisters that went to me with mum at the time. But it was happy. I suppose it was a new environment for me to get used to, but good, yeah.
You told me a little bit about your sisters before we started recording. Tell me about Becky.
Becky is, oh crikey, 32 now. I'm 36. And Becky grew up with learning difficulties, having dyspraxia, dyslexia, and had those challenges associated with it. And that was probably one of the reasons, one of the triggers for me wanting to go into politics, actually, to try and do something about making sure that anyone that's going through that school environment, primary school, secondary school, and then of course getting into the work environment, has that opportunity of being able to get on and when they've got challenges. Becky works incredibly hard, but what I've seen firsthand is the difficulties of when you're struggling with basic skills of reading and writing and life skills. Going through that school environment, that transition into secondary school, not being able to fit into the normal cycle of classes and the like is always quite difficult. And then, of course, you've got to get into the work environment, and not every employer understands the challenges that go with somebody that's got learning difficulties, someone that has those sorts of challenges of basic skills, really, that, to be fair, has been quite difficult for Becky, and I know it's still difficulties there with that. But the key thing is getting routine, because if someone has got challenges with learning difficulties and the like, sometimes it's not about money; it's about having routine, a purpose to be able to get up on a morning and understand and know what you're going to be doing that day, Becky's had it tough, but we're all there as a family to support her and get But one of the reasons why I wanted to get into politics, I think.
I'm an only child, so I can't relate to this, but suddenly not living with your sisters, going from living with them and obviously them being playing with them and hanging out and them being the closest young people to you in your life, to only seeing them in holidays. That must have been painful.
Yeah, well, it was difficult, yeah, no doubt about that. And I think when you go through your teenage years, you are then not having that same level of interaction with your sisters as your average family. But I think I got to know them better actually when I got a bit older, a bit like sort of 18, going off to, went to uni, and Rachel, she went to uni at the same time. And that's when you started to build up that relationship, because you were then going out socially with them. And that's when it ended up getting quite fun actually. Becky had her challenges and still has her challenges with learning difficulties, but we deal with it and we crack on. That is what families then do regardless of their circumstances. Mum got remarried, and I've got an awesome younger sister who is 16, and she is going through life and absolutely loving it, and things have been difficult in that respect, because Mum got remarried, and Mac, or as we called him, or John, who was known to everyone else, he died when he was 46 from liver cancer. So my younger sister, who's 16, she would have been maybe about 6 or 7 when her dad died. My stepdad died, and that was absolutely tough at that time, because we were there as older brothers and sisters, me, Rachel, and Becky, to be able to support Freya through that. This is all what makes us as we are today. Everyone goes through difficult challenges in life, but it makes us as individuals. And yes, tough experiences, but it's something that absolutely makes you who we are, makes you as an individual now to take forward and go on in life to give something back, really.
Were your parents Conservative voters?
Dad would be Conservative. Mum, I don't know. I don't think. Mum isn't political at all. I mean, Mum, we're not really a huge political family. Mum would be. I don't think Mum votes Conservative, but Dad probably is. But politics has never really actually been a big thing that we've been discussed around the dinner table, or as growing up. And I only got involved really with the Conservative Party in properly in 2015, really. So not that long ago. Always had a very keen interest in politics, but then never really got involved myself. I was that busy doing my own thing, cracking on with my own career. I'm, I suppose, not from a political background. Had my own business, worked as a chartered surveyor before coming into politics. And I think that's refreshing, actually. It's refreshing to come into politics with a skill set that you can bring to the table, rather than having worked through the political system. I didn't do politics at uni, didn't work as a special advisor. I mean, crikey, the first time I've been to Westminster was on a school trip. Second time, come back as a member of Parliament, but with a bit of life skill, a bit of business background that you can bring something to the table. So
what happened in 2015 that made you decide that you were going to become an active Conservative?
I think it was frustration, if I'm being honest. It was obviously it was the run up to the 2015 election, and it was a cold January day when I first got involved and knocked on our local Conservative campaign office door and said, "Look, how can I get involved?" I was listening to Radio 4, I think, on the Debate Today programme on the way into work, and I just became frustrated, and I thought, crikey. Frustrated with the system, I think, and frustrated that there wasn't enough fresh ideas coming forward, particularly from the opposition. Ed Miliband was the leader of the Labour Party at the time, and I was frustrated with what he was coming out with I think he was actually on the Today programme, and I thought I want to get involved, and had no ambition at all at that time of crikey, becoming a member of Parliament. Just wanted to do my bit, whether it was delivering a few leaflets, really. But one thing went to another, and it just ended up snowballing, really, and absolutely loving it. No day is ever the same, and love the variety, and loving that feeling of doing my small bit to make my part of the world a better place, really.
Maybe you're almost too normal for Parliament. It's quite an odd place.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's a bizarre place. Yeah. I mean, Westminster. I still feel that I'm learning the system of how to get stuff done in Westminster, absolutely. And it's quite daunting when you come to Westminster as a Member of Parliament. And it's also daunting being an MP in your own constituency, because you're getting correspondence coming at you from all angles on all topics, and you're absolutely wanting to do the best that you can to help everybody. But of course, we don't have all of the answers, and of course we don't know what the right strategy is to be able to help every individual. But crikey, we learn how to do it, and we pick the ball by the horns, so to speak, to be able to crack on and do that. But it's I'm 20 months in now and still learning, and I think it's full of enthusiasm, energy, and commitment, and willing to do my bit, really.
Do you have a partner?
No, it's just me, which enables me to I suppose I'm one of these people that never really takes time out for myself, and I'm really bad at that. I suppose my weakness really is just ending up being completely absorbed by the job without taking time out for myself, really. But no, it's something I need to spend more time and work on, really. Yeah.
Because it's quite important when you're in that environment to have somebody who you can confide in. And
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and have time out and actually just have chew the cud, so to speak, and talk about how the day's gone.
It can be lonely, I think.
Yeah, I suppose it is. And what you end up doing is, because no one else really gets the job, let's be honest about it, other than other colleagues.
Yeah.
And that's actually why that when you are down in Westminster, being able just to grab a cup of tea or a beer with other parliamentary colleagues is actually quite refreshing to do that, because everyone else, we all get the pressures. You get the full amount of correspondence that you're getting on a particular issue, how you've dealt with it, and that's actually quite refreshing, to be honest. It's that's quite a nice environment to be in.
And in doing my research, I noticed that you're pressing for a Bradford, my hometown, a sexual abuse inquiry in Bradford, child sexual abuse and exploitation. I'm guessing is the Tell me about that.
Absolutely right. And I am calling for that loud and clear. So child sexual abuse, child sexual exploitation, grooming has gone on across the Bradford district for decades, and particularly been a strong issue in Keighley. And I would strongly argue that since Anne Cryer, who was the Member of Parliament for Keighley 20 years ago, who did an excellent job in calling this issue out for what it was at the time 20 years ago, no traction has really changed in that period since Anne was the Member of Parliament. And what we saw in the summer was a very light review being released that said that there had been multi-agency failings across the Bradford district, failings by Bradford Council, failings by West Yorkshire Police, and concluded that there are still children in the Bradford district that remain at risk, and there is an unknown quantity of perpetrators out there that remain unchallenged. And we have to, in my view, call this issue out for what it is, and that is, if you're looking at the common denominator, a minority of Pakistani Muslim men targeting young children, and it is absolutely unfair on that Pakistani community to be branded with the same accusation. And my view is that we have to understand the scale of these horrific events that have happened and continue to happen across the Bradford district. Understand the scale so we can get true learning to go forward and provide that reassurance to victims that have gone through these horrific events to have trust back in the system that is meant to be protecting them. And that is why I'm calling for a full Rotherham-style inquiry into child sexual exploitation across the Bradford district.
What do you say to those people that say you can't single out particular people as being responsible for a particular crime?
Well, I think you have to be sensible about this and look at what the common denominator is and the facts. And that is exactly the factual situation if you look at child sexual exploitation within the Bradford district. And it's no different if you're looking at other issues like child sexual exploitation that's gone on in the Catholic Church, or what's gone on with Jimmy Savile and the like. But you have to look at what those issues are that are haunting a particular community so you can get to grips with that issue that is impacting that community. Because if you don't, you run the risk of the far right, for example, in my constituency, taking control of that conversation. And that's exactly what happened in Keighley back in 2005, when you had the likes of Nick Griffin from the BNP standing to be a Member of Parliament for Keighley, running on the back of this conversation, trying to stir up racial tensions. And my view is that you absolutely have to have someone that's sensible, that's willing to take control of the narrative, so you can get to grips with the issue.
You obviously are in the governing party.
Yeah.
Do you think, could the Home Secretary grant this? How do you think it can be achieved, what you want to happen?
Well, if you look at what happened in Rotherham, it was Rotherham Council that instigated the Rotherham-style reviews, so that J report. And I suspect at the time when Rotherham Council instigated that, they didn't think it was going to be quite as damning as it was. But what was clear is that actually the local authority, so Bradford Council, have the ability to instigate a full independent review of the scale of which the J report was undertaken in Rotherham.
You've been quite vocal about your demands for this inquiry. Have you felt any tension? Have you been subject to any abuse from anybody around the constituency because of your calls for this inquiry?
I haven't actually, no, not yet, no. And I'm conscious that others have in the past, but I haven't yet. And I actually think that illustrates that there is a desire by the community that I'm representing to get to the bottom of this. If you go and knock on any door, and it is the strongest conversation that comes up when I'm going around the constituency speaking to residents, is the issue that child grooming, child sexual exploitation has not been tackled properly, and there is a strong willingness that we need to tackle this once and for all and get to the bottom of it. And that linked to the strong issues that we have with drug dealing across the constituency. Now, these two issues are interlinked, and my residents are, I believe, are right behind me in calling for this. And perhaps that illustrates why I have not received any abuse on this subject yet.
Any abuse on any subject?
Yes, yeah, and I think every MP does, unfortunately, and that's been one of the things that I wasn't prepared for when becoming a Member of Parliament. And it saddens me to say that actually it seems to be one of these things that goes with the job. But let's not forget, all of us sat round here as, whether you're a parish councillor or a Member of Parliament, we're all standing up to put our heads above the parapet to do the right thing to improve our communities. And it's a shame that a lot of us get horrendous amounts of abuse, and you only have to look at the extreme of what's happened in the last 5 years with the likes of Joe Cox, and only 10 days ago with Sir David Amess.
You changing the way you do surgeries?
Well, no, I'm not. My view is that I have to be, and I think for a Member of Parliament to be to do their job properly is to be as accessible to their constituents as possible. And I really enjoy doing supermarket surgeries, street surgeries, and having constituents into the office or the village hall or wherever it may be. Of course, we've got to do our due diligence, and we've got to keep our wits about us as a Member of Parliament. But as members of Parliament, we've got to be accessible, and I love nothing more than doing that, whether it's knocking on a door, speaking to a resident, or getting out and interacting with them. That is what our job is, to represent our communities.
Robbie Moore, thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thanks.
Well, we asked Bradford Council for a comment. Jane Booth, Independent Chair of the Bradford Partnership, replied, while we disagree with the call for a local public inquiry into child sexual exploitation, as it would divert resources away from frontline child protection, we do want to see a wider debate that highlights this national issue and which has the power to bring additional resources to protect children. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria de Piero. Tomorrow, I'll be back from 11:40 alongside Liam Halligan and a host of experts, guests for our special autumn budget coverage. Up next, it's On the Money. Then Liam and I will be with you at between 2 and 3. But for now, I'll leave you with your weather.
Hello there. Autumn is very much with us across the UK. Often quite cloudy out there through the day today. Some wet weather to come across Scotland, but very mild for this time of year. Now that's all down to our air coming up from the southwest. You can see these warm yellows and oranges produced across the map, means that it is going to be a pretty mild picture. We have got weather fronts up towards Scotland, bringing some rain and some fairly tightly packed isobars, which bring a strong wind as well. Let's take a look at the picture across Scotland. We've already had some quite heavy rain pushing its way through during this morning. A brief lull in that rain, but then it turns heavier and more persistent for the Western Isles and Western Highland later on in the day. Strong and gusty winds, gusts of 50 miles an hour here. Elsewhere, quite a lot of cloud across the country. A few bright or sunny breaks, but very mild for this time of year. Highs of 17 degrees Celsius. Through this evening then, that rain starts to edge its way a little bit further east and southwards, getting into Northern Ireland through the evening, and then later in the night getting through into Northern England as well. To the south of it, it stays very mild. We'll have a few bits and pieces of drizzle across Western Hills. These are the temperatures we should be seeing by daytime in October, not the overnight temperatures with a keen breeze. As we go through Wednesday morning then, we've got this rain pushing its way in and persisting through much of the day. You can see it really doesn't move very quickly. So we have a rain warning in force. There is the risk of some flooding through Cumbria, southwest Scotland, some difficult travelling conditions as well. 1 or 2 showers to the west of Scotland. To the south of that rain band, another very mild day, highs of 18 degrees Celsius. That's 64 in Fahrenheit with a keen southwesterly breeze. As we go through Wednesday evening, then we'll continue to see this rain just trickling a little bit further southwards into northwest Wales. It stays on the mild side, a few clear spells as we go into the overnight period. And then it turns more unsettled more widely across the country through Thursday and Friday. Strong winds, the risk of some heavy rain. And as we head into the weekend, temperatures sliding away. I'll see you later.